It is Friday morning. We're talking NFL DFS Week 9. We have a very, very interesting slate this week. We're going to break it all down for you. Coming up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Happy Friday morning to everybody out there. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday DFS version. I am Scott Jenstad, joined, Ryan's always here. I'm not always here, but Ryan is here, Ryan Belongia. We appreciate you guys listening. Appreciate everybody that can, if you please rate or review the podcast, helps out a lot in that regard too. So I'm back. I've been off for a few weeks. So I wouldn't say off, but I've been busy with the real job for a few weeks. So it's good to be back. Ryan, good to see you. How's everything in your world?
Yeah, good to see you, Scott. Glad to have you back. Everything's going well. Got lucky last week. Continued the good run in NFL.
Nice.
I faded. I got lucky because I faded AJ Brown and Kamara in cash games, and they smashed in the early game. I thought I was dead, but I swapped onto Burrow, McCaffrey, and Trey McBride, and they carried me there. Yeah, so I just got over the line. So yeah, I went to thinking I was going to lose everything, and then I ended up just cashing everything by a hair. So yeah, it felt good.
I figured I had to come back because I left. The Niners were 5-0. I come back and the Niners are an absolute disaster. It's apparently they need me on the podcast.
Yeah, I see a lot of people sort of freaking out about Purdy, but I don't know. I'm still pretty high on Purdy and the 49ers. I think it's just like a little blip. I think they're going to be okay. What do you think?
I'm not freaking about Purdy at all. I think the offense has been still pretty decent. I mean, not as good, but the defense is killing them right now. It's these like long drives. I mean, it seemed like Cincinnati just got first downs at will. It wasn't even like the points. It was just that they were on the field constantly. Every time it was a first down. And the offense it's even in the Minnesota game. Like the Minnesota game, the offense was never on the field. It felt like here's your 5 series. You better score your 30 points. So I don't know why the defense is so bad right now, but it's legit bad right now. I imagine they'll figure it out. They picked up Chase Young. They've obviously got a ton of talented players, but the last 2 weeks, like the defense has just been absolutely destroyed and like it kind of dominated in those 2 games.
Yeah. Let me just play the other side of that. Sometimes Burrow's so good that it doesn't matter. Yeah. We've seen him do that to the best defenses in the league and the playoffs the last 2 seasons. So,
he was legit awesome on Sunday.
He was awesome.
He was awesome.
Yeah. And the week before that, Kirk Cousins played, the best the best we've seen in years. Kirk Cousins looked like, and I think that was as much Cousins as it was maybe the Niners defense being bad. So I think you really just ran into 2 quarterbacks who were on fire. At least that was part of it.
Cousins dropped back 45 times. They had no sacks. Like that's probably the most concerning stat.
Fair. That's a fair point. Yeah. Well, maybe Chase Young can help that.
Yeah, it's weird because you look at all the advanced stats. I won't get into too deep in the answer. We're not going to get on the slate, but like you look at the advanced stats and stats, and like Nick Bosa's like dominant still. But you watch the game, and you're like, I don't know, he's getting kind of blocked by the right tackle 1-on-1, and I'm sure the advanced numbers know that he's getting pressures and hits. But it's he's going to get some actual sacks here at some point. But secondary has to cover long enough to have the quarterback hold the ball too. There's a lot of things. I imagine they'll work it out. But 5-3 in the bye. Feels a lot different when you're 5-0 than it does if you're just kind of, going win and losing. If 5-3 would feel okay, 5-3 feels really bad when you're 5-0 and just coming off that Dallas game where you dominated them and people are like, oh my gosh, this team might win 14, 15 games.
Yeah, well, you'd hate to have it be too easy.
Yeah, right. That's never a problem with that as a Niners fan. But let's jump into Week 9, Ryan. This slate is odd to say the least. It is one of the weirder slates we've done this. We've done this for many years. To get right into it, we have 10 games on this slate. We've got a slew of primetime games. We had Tennessee-Pittsburgh last night, which was kind of ugly. But then we have 2 really, really good games as primetime games. If you want to count primetime, the Europe game is off the slate, but that's Miami and Kansas City. I might actually have to get up at 6:30 on the West Coast and watch that game. That is a really fun game, obviously. Bills-Bengals, suddenly now the Bengals look good again. That looks like a great game on Sunday night. And then Chargers-Jets, not so good on Monday night. But take some big-name teams off our slate. And then you've got you get Detroit on bye. You have the 49ers on bye. Denver and Jacksonville on bye, too. So you got 4 teams off. You got 4 huge name teams, plus the Chargers playing on the primetime games. Brings us to a crazy group of low-scoring games, I guess is how I call it. We've got 7 games early, 3 late. We have 5 games on this slate that are under 40 as the Vegas total, and we have 1 that's over 45. I don't think we've – and that one's 46.5. Nothing in the 50s, very high-scoring games. This is a slate where you're really going to have to find a couple of games that are going over and kind of ride them.
Yeah, it feels like we keep saying this, but the totals are just – they continue to be low and not give us many options. You mentioned all the, elite teams that are off this slate. It leaves us with very few options in the top range at basically every position.
Yeah.
Like Lamar and Hurts are the only 2 quarterbacks over 6,500, which is crazy.
And they're what, 8,000, 8,200? So that means there's a gap of 1,500 where there's no players.
Right. The next QB is Dak Prescott at 6,500.
That's
never
wild.
really seen anything like that.
Yeah.
And then, with some of those teams we have off the slate, so there's no Tyreek Hill, no Jamar Chase. It really makes someone like AJ Brown stand out. And then at the running back position, there's really not much either, except Kamara all the way up to 8,100. So he stands out. So you don't have many elite players. So the ones we do have end up standing out even more. And then
it feels like a week where you can kind of just play who you want. Like it just because there's so few super expensive guys. You can pick the expensive guys you want, play them, and there's I will talk about it later, but there's so many cheap receivers I like this week that I feel like if you wanted to go too expensive, you can kind of play who you want this week.
Yeah, I agree. It feels like I just want to play the best options and then fill it in from there. Like my cash game lineup, I started Hurts, Kamara, AJ Brown, just the top options at every position. And you mentioned there's plenty of cheap wide receiver options. It does just seem like you can play whoever you want. So that's what I'm going to do, at least in cash games.
Yeah, but the filling in is really important there, and then the which of the expensive guys you do play is also important. I mean, there are a few to pick from, so it becomes interesting. It's one of those slates you got to like really find a couple gems, because I think a lot of people are going to do what you did, especially in cash games, is play those 3-ish top options. I mean, we can argue which guy it is, but play 2 or 3 of those top options and kind of fill in with some of these cheap names. But picking the right cheap names, picking the right one mid-range running backs will be really important. Also building some tournament lineups with different quarterbacks. I think a lot of people will have Hurts and Lamar. They jump off the page as the obvious plays this week. They're not cheap, but like we said, there's enough cheap options you can play them. Lineups with some of these cheaper quarterbacks, I think, will be really interesting ones that could do some damage.
Yes, I agree. I think tournament lineups are very interesting this week.
Yeah.
Cash, maybe not so much. It's somewhat straightforward. But yeah, there's all kinds of cheap QBs you can play.
And all you got to do is pick a couple of them, and the lineup becomes completely different than some of the standard ones. But before we get into players, let's talk about the games. We've got we do have a couple of really big games on the slate. Even though we missed the Bills, Bengals, and Miami, KC, there are 4. I'd call them pretty huge NFL games this weekend. We got those 2. Then you've got the top 2 games on this slate with the totals. We got the Cowboys at the Eagles, 46.5. Obviously, those names are huge. The teams, but they're also really good teams. Philly scored on 48.8 of their possessions, which is a pretty wild stat. Their offense is really coming along. Jalen Hurts does not look fully healthy. He's not running the ball the last 2 weeks. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about quarterbacks. But this game is 46.5, and then Seahawks-Ravens. Another really game. For my money, I think Baltimore is the best team in the NFL right now. I know that probably is not popular. Probably Chiefs and Eagles fans wouldn't like that. But right now, I take Baltimore. Doesn't mean in a playoff game I would, but right now I take Baltimore. And Seattle's leading the NFC West. They've overtaken the 49ers in the division. So that game's 44.5. 2 really good football games.
Yeah, and I think the 2 games that will be the most popular in DFS for tournaments, and understandable. There's not much else on the slate. Some of the other stuff I was looking at, it looks like a really good spot for New England in that
things we have not said in a long time.
Right. And it was made better by the fact that Washington traded away Montez Sweat and Chase Young.
Yeah.
The top 2 defensive linemen. So, it looks like a good spot for them, and some of their players were already going to be relatively popular. Kendrick Bourne just went out. Devontae Parker's going to be out. So Demario Douglas is looking like one of the top cash plays this week. Same with Ramondre Stevenson. He's still really cheap. And the Patriots have been in a lot of tough matchups this season and a lot of bad game scripts. And this one figures to be positive. So I think the Patriots will be a popular target. I think the Colts-Panthers game is interesting.
That's my game right there. I love this.
Yeah, I think that's a great game for tournaments. There's good options on both sides that we'll get into. Yeah, as far as those top two games, I think Philly and Dallas is going to be the most popular, and it's understandable. It's just got the highest total. Those teams, they gotten a couple shootouts last year when they played. I think the last time they played, it combined for 80 points. Dallas.
Can I go to Colts Panthers for 1 second before you move on?
Sure. Yeah.
Have you looked at the Colts results this year? I'm just going to read you their scores in their games.
Yeah.
Not who won, just who the scores. 31-21, 31-20, 22-19. That was Baltimore, so that's fine. 23-29. 37-20, 23-16, 39-38, 38-27. Like, they have played in games averaging 54.3 points a game, second highest in the NFL. I never would have guessed that until I really got into some research. The Colts games there have been some fantasy carnivals at Colts games. It's kind of wild, not what you expect. That total's 43.5. I think that goes over, and I'm actually going to bet that over. I think that goes. I think that's the game that pops out to me as the one in this kind of glut of middle total games that's going to jump off the page.
Yeah, it does to me too. That was interesting, and you see that the Colts are first, I believe, in situation neutral pace and first in no huddle rate. Wow. So yeah, with Minshew now, their games just produce a lot of plays and a lot of points, and the Panthers were held back last week by the Texans playing incredibly slow, and this game should be different. Yeah, there's good options on both sides. That game environment's great.
It's just a matter if the Panthers can do enough to really push it. I hope they can. I thought Bryce Young looked better last week, actually. It was better, his best YPA game. I thought he made some good decisions in that game. It's a matter of if Carolina can get in the 20s, that game could really be fun.
Yeah, and I agree. I think they can. I think Bryce Young has looked better. You'd expect him to continue to get better coming off the bye. It takes some time as a rookie. It's a great matchup for the Panthers too. So, yeah, I think they can stay competitive. I mean, I think they can score points. We just saw PJ Walker put up 39 on them or something. I know the defense was part of it, but still. And then, just to finish on those top games, the Philly-Dallas game will be the most popular, and then the Baltimore-Seattle game, I think, is good leverage off that. The Seahawks have been sort of unlucky the last couple weeks in that they've stalled inside the 20, inside the 10 so many times. They've turned it over on downs. They've thrown interceptions. They've settled for field goals. And they've been home favorites in a lot of spots where they've been popular recently and just sort of didn't need to push it, but this game should be different. Both of Geno Smith's 300-yard passing games this season have come when they're underdogs and actually needing to throw. And again, that should be the case here. Baltimore's offense has really started to click, like you mentioned. They look like one of the best teams in the league. So yeah, I like that game too. I don't think anyone's going to play the Seattle side, so you can get some leverage there.
Yeah, I agree there, and we'll talk about there's one player in particular I like in that game that I don't know how popular it'll be, but I do.
I have a feeling we're going to say the same guy, but
probably
we'll see.
And we got in the middle here. You mentioned Commanders, Patriots, Bears, Saints is 41.5 in this range too. There's some weird games this week, and then we've got 5 games that are totals under 40. Like, we used to not see 4. Like, it used to be like in the rain, in the snow, 2 bad teams, windy, maybe you get under 40. It has definitely changed the last couple of years. We talked about it a lot last year where we kept getting games in the 40s and they kept moving them down. But we have Tampa Bay and Houston, 39.5, Rams, Packers. Like, that would have been a 55-point game a couple of years ago. It's 38.5. Vikings, Falcons, 37.5. The Falcons are gross. They don't have a touchdown outside the red zone yet this season. That's not a great stat for midseason. Cardinals Browns at 37.5. We think Deshaun Watson's going to play, and the Giants Raiders 37.5. Daniel Jones is back, but Raiders are going with Aiden O'Connell. Jimmy Garoppolo has been benched. To the surprise of everyone except for 49ers fans, Jimmy has struggled. I don't know what people fully saw in coming out there, but are any of those games in the 30s games that you find yourself, there's going to be some pieces in there we'll like, and I think we'll talk about a couple of running backs, especially in those games. But are any of those games you're like, I think that total's too low, I'm actually going to play some players in that game, or just kind of these are all as they look to you?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it says a lot about the state of the league. A lot of injuries to quarterbacks, a lot of bad quarterbacks, a lot of bad offenses.
Yeah.
I mean, you said it, these totals are crazy. I don't know. There's pieces in some of these games that look okay.
Yeah.
I don't know about, the Saints have a 25-point total. Might be the highest on the slate. So, you could see something like play a bunch of Saints, Derek Carr, Kamara, and Olave or Shaheed or whoever. But yeah, I don't know that I want to play the Bears side in that game. I don't know. Daniel Jones. I think some people might look to Daniel Jones. I don't know about the other side of that game. I don't know, Scott. Nothing really stands out to me. Yeah. What about you?
It does no games that I'm like, what, I think this is going to be interesting. These games do look pretty gross. I think we're going to get some running backs in these games. I think they're going to, you look at Bijan, you look at Saquon Barkley, especially, I think will be pretty popular going against the Raiders, who have given up the running back one on the slate the last 2 weeks. Jahmyr Gibbs and Dante Foreman have been the top running backs both against the Raiders the last 2 weeks. So I think you get a lot of Saquon. The rest of these are going to be like kind of bits and pieces, some cheap receivers here and there. But man, these games, like, it's hard to come up with a scenario where you think these games get really back and forth. I mean, you look at Rams-Packers, like the Packers can't do anything in the first half. It's the weirdest stat. They're so bad in the first half, and then actually a pretty good team in second half of games. I don't know if it takes Jordan Love time to figure out what's going on, but man, they look horrible in first halves, but then second halves, they look pretty good. As a Packers fan, you got a feel for what's going on there?
Other than the fact that Jordan Love's not very good.
Yeah,
no.
You've landed on that already?
Yeah, I think it just seems pretty clear to me that he's just not a good enough passer to consistent enough down the field, doesn't get rid of it fast enough. I mean, look at a guy like Will Levis the last 2 weeks. I mean, Jordan Love doesn't inspire that type of confidence. I don't know. You just see some guys that have it and some guys don't. And you figure that Love, he had so much time behind Aaron Rodgers watching and learning. I think, it's tough for me to be too optimistic about the Packers. I'm not sure Love is the guy. I don't know. So a bit of a downer. But that's just how I feel. Packers have looked really bad. I don't know.
They have looked bad. They are the Packers are 30th in the NFL in first half point differential and second in the NFL in second half point differential. They're minus 59 in first halves and plus 43 in second halves. I can't figure out a way to explain. It's just that's so strange.
I guess there must be something to explain that. I don't know. Maybe it's. And
it's weird. It's not like they're getting blown out in every game and they're just getting garbage points. Some of these games are catching up into games. It's been they've been awful in the first half.
People constantly criticize LaFleur's play calling, and it's been very conservative. And then maybe in the second half they're behind, and
you got to open it up.
I don't know. I'm just guessing, but not too much optimism for the Packers.
Yeah, well, let's jump into talking players and stacks and cheap guys and what we're going here. But first, a note from our sponsors at Circa. Get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. Watch the game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seat at the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. A touchdown at the world's largest sports book, Circa Sports, for the big game bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen to watch the game on. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The big game party is only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. As someone who's been to Circa in their sportsbook, that would be an awesome place to watch Super Bowl. So definitely jump on that. You mentioned earlier that there's the cash game lineup could have some kind of boring chalk plays. Tell me, before we get into tournament lineups here, tell me who you think is everybody to go Hurts, AJ, and either Kamara or Saquon? What do you think? What do you think this boring cash lineup kind of looks like?
Yeah, I think people start with those three: Hurts, Kamara, Hurts, Kamara, Brown. Yeah.
Is Kamara automatically for you over Saquon? In terms of like a standard slot him in cash kind of guy.
For cash games, yeah. Just what Kamara has shown in the receiving game is too much to ignore, and
some of his target numbers are just nuts.
Yeah, and it's a better spot for New Orleans too. They're home against Tyson Bagent, right? Fields isn't going to play, right? Yeah.
Fields.
Home against Tyson Bagent is just. You're right. I shouldn't say that. You mentioned the Raiders have been very bad against running backs, so I get it for Saquon too. It's just Kamara's going to be way more popular, so kind of just follow that in cash games. He'll probably be twice as popular would be my guess.
Does everyone just click Trey McBride in cash lineups too?
Yeah, I don't think everyone will. Tight end's going to be interesting.
Because he's still 3,700 coming off that game. Like if you click any kind of sites that do value per dollar, like he jumps off the tight end is pretty big.
Yeah.
Although we don't know who's playing quarterback there either, so there's that.
Right. If it's Clayton Tune, I don't think I'd be quite as excited. There's other guys that project similarly in that range, like Njoku, Logan Thomas, and you could even go all the way down to Daniel Bellinger at 2,500. I think some people will do that just because it's tight end and Waller's out. I don't know.
I know a lot about football and watch college too. I don't know who the hell Clayton Tune is. I know he went to Houston, but man, it's weird. I feel like we do this show. I follow football closely. I know everybody, and there's been like 4 quarterbacks this year I've never heard of that played quarterback. It's wild how. Usually it's like, oh, backup. Oh, I know who that is. It's Chase Daniel or whoever it is. But it's been weird. Clayton Tune, Tyson Badgett. There've been so many guys that I don't even know who this guy is. I've never heard. He wasn't even a prospect coming out of college. Clayton Tune was a 5th round pick in the draft this year. It's wild how these teams are at guys that we've never even heard of.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one. I've had to look up plenty of guys. Yeah. Hasn't been like that in other years.
I play college fantasy. I follow this stuff really close, and I'm getting names. I'm like, I kind of know what college he went to, but nothing else. It's just it's been wild. But
go ahead.
Yeah,
since we're on the subject of cash games, guy I wanted to ask you about is Josh Jacobs. Just an overall take because I see him at the top of the projections again. I think part of it is that this is the first time he's been priced below 7K, so it's going to make his projection look a little bit better at home against the Giants. But I don't know. I'm not inspired by Jacobs here. What do you think?
It's this tough mix, right? He's still the guy. He gets huge percentage of the touches, but man, I think their situation looks bad. I think he looks bad. He's at 3.1 yards per carry. He's dead last in the NFL in carries that go 10 plus yards by percentage. I think it's 3% of his carries have gone for 10 plus yards. I'm gonna look up that stat as I'm talking, but it's somewhere in that range. It's really, really bad. Yeah, it's 3% dead last in the rate of runs to gain 10 yards or more. So nothing explosive. And I guess under 7,000, you don't need explosive. But man, if I was playing in that range, I'd take Tony Pollard and Jonathan Taylor in the second over Jacobs this week. So I don't think I'll get there. I don't know if I go Kenneth Walker. That's kind of a tough spot with Kenneth Walker. He needs goal line carries to work. He only had 9 touches last week too, which kind of freaks me out. But yeah, I just I love the volume and the workload on Jacobs. I just don't love the player right now. I don't love the offense. We're getting Aiden O'Connell this week. I think that's probably more interesting than Jimmy, and maybe hits a couple more big plays. He looked great in the preseason. We talked about he looked okay in the one game he played this year, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not inspired by Jacobs either. I know he's under 7,000. I know he's a workhorse, but I just don't like the production at all right now. There's just other guys in this range this week I'd rather play.
Yeah, no, me too. Yeah, it seems like he's going to be popular enough where you're going to have to, if you're going to fade him. Yeah,
you gotta hope he doesn't score 3 times.
Yeah, that in the other game that the only game that Aiden O'Connell started, he targeted Jacobs 11 times. I don't know if that says anything. Jacobs had 8 catches for 81 yards.
That's something.
But I don't know if they had. I don't know what's been going on. I don't know if Abdullah was there. I don't know. I see he's been in on more third downs. I don't know. Yeah, I just was surprised by the projection and the expected popularity of Jacobs, and I like other running backs better too.
I love all the people who are shocked that Jimmy missed Devontae Adams wide open down the field. Like, what are we doing? Like, he would miss on one of those every week with the Niners. Like, Shanahan would wait like 2.5 quarters for the perfect play, and then he'd overthrow someone that was wide open. Like,
it is kind of curious why.
Did we not watch the Super Bowl with Emmanuel Sanders wide open for the winning touchdown? He overthrew him. Like, it's just what he does.
Right. Like expectations, I think, were a bit too high.
Like he won a lot of games. Don't get me wrong. He's a great dude. Everybody seems to like him. But if you need a big play down the field, like there's no one you'd want less. Like that's not who he is. He's accurate in his zone. He makes good quick decisions. But you get a couple interceptions, you're going to get missed open guys. It's just the way he is down the field.
Yeah, and he was in like the best system that a guy like that could be in to succeed.
Yeah.
With that defense, with Shanahan, with the skill players. It's different now.
Yeah. So let's jump into what we do at positions this week. We'll talk about quarterback first. You kind of mentioned off the top, Lamar and Jalen Hurts are the expensive guys, the obvious guys, the one people will play. Lamar's 8,200 against Seattle. Hurts is 8,000 against Dallas. I guess my main question is for you is, do you have a strong preference between the two this week?
I don't have a strong preference for cash games. I'll just go with Hurts because he'll probably be twice as popular, and he's cheaper. And you just don't want to lose at the quarterback position in cash games. I don't have a strong preference. You mentioned Hurts not running as much. I remember the last podcast we did, I believe, was for the Week 5 game against the Rams, and we said the same thing. And then he had 15 carries for 72 yards.
Yeah. This one's different to me because he doesn't look healthy when he runs right now. Like he had a play. He had a play last week where I think he ran left and went out of bounds, and like the last yard or two, and then was on the side. He was definitely limping. Like you could tell he was not, the boom explosive Jalen Hurts that we see. I mean, he has 21 yards rushing and 6 yards rushing the last 2 weeks. Like that's a pretty significant thing. I know you still get the tush push, although they ran the trick play off it last week with Swift. Like if they're gonna run a trick play off that, good luck stopping any of those. But his ceiling definitely drops if he's not running and scoring and doing stuff on the ground. Like he had 319 and 4 touchdowns last week. So like he can still do plenty in the pass game. Their offense is awesome. But the ceiling does drop a little bit. Both his big passing games have been against Washington, so you got to take that into effect a little bit. But I love this game. I think this game will get it back. I think the Dallas is going to get a little more offense than people think. I think the Dak's playing really well right now. I'd probably pick Hurts over Lamar this week too.
I think if you just look at the numbers, he's been a lot more consistent. He's been over 21 fantasy points in 6 straight. And then you look at Lamar, and he had 11 last week against Arizona. He had 11 against Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago, 18 against Tennessee.
Lamar is top 10 in 5 games and then outside the top 20 in 3 games.
There you go. So I know it's a small sample, but you feel like the range of outcomes is a little bit wider than Hurts. I don't know. They're both good options.
Yeah, they are. I mean, it's just with Hurts, it's tough. They get to the 1 yard line, like it's an automatic 6 points. It's just it's tough to stop that. But I think that game will be fun. On the other side of that game, do you have any interest in playing Dak? Dak has been quarterback 1 and quarterback 3 the last 2 weeks. The Eagles played Tua really well, but then Sam Howell thrashed them last week. It's like Sam Howell had a huge game against Philly last week. Should be a good game script. Should be points. Should be Philly. Philly's favored in that game. They're at home. What does one do with Dak? He's stuck in this weird range in the middle where everybody's going to play Lamar, Hurts, and if you don't, you probably just jump down and play someone cheap to save a lot of money. I feel like Dak is just kind of lost in this middle where no one's going to play anybody.
Yeah, and I have some interest in Dak.
I do too.
You mentioned the Cowboys' offense has looked better, definitely, and Dak has looked better. The last 2 games have been their best games of the season. He's thrown for 11 touchdowns in his last 3 games against the Eagles. And they've had a good defense. They're that entire time. So I'm not really worried about that. These Cowboys-Eagles games have been combining for points. I have some interest in CeeDee Lamb, so that gives me some interest in Dak. We saw him run a little bit more against the Chargers. He does have that upside to run for a touchdown. I do have interest in Dak, especially because, with only Lamar and Hurts up at the top, there's a clearer path to being the top quarterback. Lamar and Hurts can score 20, 25 points, and that's fine. You don't need that. Dak can outscore that. Any of these cheap guys can. I think there's an argument for playing cheap quarterbacks this week because there's not as much in their way as usual.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the cheap guys are really interesting. There's 4 or 5 named down here under 6,000 that I never get to hear in quarterback. Every once in a while, I'll build a stack here, but we got a lot of cheap quarterbacks this week. We got Baker Mayfield's 5,200 in against Houston, Minshew and Bryce Young, and we mentioned the Carolina Indy game, 5,200 for Minshew, 5,100 for Bryce Young. Sam Howell last week off the huge game. He's had some ugly games, but he's been a top 12 quarterback in 4 of the last 5 weeks. They went to a quick passing game last week. He was getting sacked 400 times a game. It's on pace to set historic records in sacks. Got sacked once by the Eagles last week, and he got the butter of the ball quick the entire game. Used Jahan Dotson, used Terry McLaurin. So he's 5,800. Mac Jones is 4,900. You mentioned a good spot for New England, 4,900 against Washington. It's the best matchup you can get right now. Every quarterback versus Washington since week 1 has been a top 10 on the week, including Tyrod Taylor and Desmond Ridder. That if you carry those guys to top 10 weeks, you're really, really trying to be bad. We had Aiden O'Connell at 4,500. What does one do with all these cheap guys? There are a ton of options. How do you parse through them and pick the right one?
I like both options in that Washington-New England game. For all the reasons you said about Howell, that combined with I just like New England guys. I like Stevenson. I like Demario Douglas. Mac Jones, 4,900, just kind of by default. You mentioned Washington has been bad all season, and they just lost their best 2 pass rushers. So, what a spot for Mac Jones.
It was a great matchup before they traded those 2 guys.
Right. It was a great matchup before that. Look, I know it's Mac Jones, but he's capable. He's capable at least sometimes. He actually looked pretty good in that game against Buffalo. So, it wouldn't shock me to see him have a good game. I like the quarterbacks. I like Minshew and Bryce Young in that game. I just like that game environment a lot. The one guy you didn't mention that normally, he's a tough roster, but Derek Carr's thrown for over 300 in 3 straight games. It's
funny. He was the one I had on my list. I just kind of skipped him, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's tough, but he's put up over 20 fantasy points in all of those games without that many touchdowns, with, getting vultured by Taysom Hill. And so, what I'm saying is obviously that's likely to happen most of the time, but there is opportunity for him to put up bigger scores if, some of those deep passes would have went for touchdowns. I have interest in Kamara and some interest in Olave and maybe even Shaheed. So just sort of by default, I could throw Derek Carr in there.
Yeah, weirdly, the Saints' offense has gotten more interesting and fun, although Chris Olave has not been part of that. He had the drop touchdown, then Carr missed him on one the next play. That was rough. And Chicago's 29th in points allowed to quarterback, so that works too. I think I'm focusing on the Carolina Indy game. I really like Gardner Minshew. Carolina's just got to do a little bit. He's thrown the ball 40 plus times in 4 of the last 5 weeks. He's dropping back and they're throwing. You mentioned before a good point. They're playing fast. You're playing. They combine playing fast and throwing a lot. It's just you're going to get stats out of that. He's got 7 total touchdowns last 2 weeks. He can run it in too. You mentioned that with Dak earlier. He had a couple rushing touchdowns last week. Carolina's been good against quarterbacks, but mostly because teams really haven't had to throw very much. I don't put too much weight in that. It's just teams have run the ball so much against them because you just don't have to. So if Carolina can score a little point, we do need to get that. But I do really like this game. I think that the only issue with Bryce Young is he's struggled with zone defense so far. The Colts play the most zone defense in the NFL. They play the least amount of man, but they're not good against the pass. They're leveraging 7.6 yards per attempt. I mentioned Bryce last week, first game for best YPA game of the year. They're the same price, so I just kind of lean Minshew in that game. But I think stacking either way works there. I think I'm going to have a lot of lineups with those guys in it. I do lean Minshew in this range. I wouldn't argue too hard against anybody. I think I like Minshew more than Mac Jones. I get that he's 4,900, but Minshew's 52, Bryce is 51. They're all really cheap also. It's a fun week in that, like, there's 5 or 6 quarterbacks down here that we can argue about it and talk about playing. That kind of most weeks we just be like, oh, I'm just going to move up to the 6,500 guy and make it easy. There's a lot of plays this week because if you move up, you're moving up to 8,000. It changes your whole lineup.
Yeah, I think you broke that down well. That's an interesting stat about Bryce Young against zone defenses. I was already thinking maybe he doesn't have the ceiling as some of these other guys in there. Minshew for sure. The Colts have had a 20% no huddle rate since he took over. And yeah, you mentioned those rushing touchdowns. Those 2 rushing touchdowns against Cleveland were awesome. And I mean, he's busting out dance moves after them. I mean, Minshew's a guy that you never mind rostering. He's such a gamer, and yet this is a great spot. So yeah, I'm with you. Yeah,
and you're right. You're right. He is fun. But so let's jump into, now that we know we've got the expensive quarterbacks. We have the one mid-range with Dak. We got the cheap guys. Let's jump into other positions, kind of see how we build everything together. The first note from our sponsors at Splash. RotoWire is proud to partner with Splash Sports for the 2023 fantasy football season. Splash Sports empowers gaming commissioners to earn by creating contests. Commissioners can set up contests, add their style, and enjoy the evolving Splash Sports platform for customized preferences. From daily to season-long contests, Splash Sports caters to various playing styles such as DFS, Pick, and traditional Survivor. And unlike traditional sportsbooks, Splash Sports pits you against friends and family, not the house. Splash goes beyond betting, a space where friends can connect, strategize, and share in the excitement of sports. RotoWire will be running weekly DFS tiers contests on Splash Sports all season. Can you beat the RotoWire experts? Visit rotowire.com/splash. That's hard to say right there to enter today. That's rotowire.com/splash to enter today. So we talked about expensive running backs. There's really only 2 this week. There's Alvin Kamara and there's Saquon Barkley. Kamara's 8,100. Barkley is 7,900. You mentioned before you thought Kamara would be more popular. Do you have a preference between the 2? I actually prefer Barkley this week. It seems like you probably prefer Kamara.
Well, I don't know. You know, you're kind of selling me on Barkley. At least for cash games, I'll play Kamara, but for tournaments, I might take that leverage with Barkley.
He had 36. He had 36 carries last week.
Yeah, and it was part of that the fact that who was playing quarterback? Tommy DeVito.
Yeah. He had negative passing yards in that game, by the way, and he came in like the second quarter, third quarter, like he played a bunch.
Yeah. He came in the second quarter.
Again, had to look up who the hell that was when he came in. I admit it.
Me too.
I was like DeVito. I thought someone was making a joke, and I looked. I'm like, oh, Syracuse, and I was like, I kind of remember the name, but man, it would take me a while to get that one too. But that game was horrible, and he had a lot of carries because they had nobody playing quarterback. But I think Daniel Jones helps. It should help Saquon. Like the threat of him running should open up some holes. The Raiders are allowing 4.6 yards per carry. They're 30th in the NFL in yards from scrimmage for running backs. I mentioned the last 2 running back ones, Jahmyr Gibbs and Dante Foreman, were against the Raiders. I just don't think they can stop anybody. I love Saquon. I think the volume will be there. You give me the volume against this defense. I'm gonna kind of take it all. I think Saquon's looked good the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, I'm completely sold. I'm glad you mentioned all that. One thing I've been trying to. Sometimes I look for which running back is playing against the worst quarterback, and I'm not saying Aiden O'Connell's the worst quarterback, but I'm saying. It's a bump to the running. It's a bump to the opposing running back when you're playing against one of these quarterbacks. And I also think it's a little bump for Saquon that Darren Waller's out. He's just a guy that eats some usage and short yardage catches that can also go to Saquon. You mentioned the Raiders have been horrible against running backs the last couple weeks, giving up the RB1. I'm glad I'm talking to you this morning because I may, if I was just in my own little bubble, I may have blindly just clicked Kamara, who I still like. I mean, how can you?
I was to say it's not an argument against Kamara. Like
no,
the Bears.
It's an argument. It's an argument for Saquon.
Agreed. And the Raiders running D has been good, so you got to factor that in. But it's funny. Look at Kamara. He missed the first 3 games. He's already second in receiving points among running backs behind Christian McCaffrey already. So it's like you get a ton of work. He's got 17 plus carries the last 4 weeks, which is key. Like you always get the passing, you get the carries. Like I wouldn't argue against Kamara. I would just argue for Barkley is kind of my point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
So we've got a whole bunch of guys in the mid-range here. We've got Kenneth Walker at 7,000. You mentioned Josh Jacobs earlier, 6,900. I think he'd be fairly popular. Tony Pollard at 6,800. Really dropped in price. He's had a weird season. They've had weird blowouts both ways. They have 4 blowout games, kind of killed his production. DeAndre Swift 6,600. Jonathan Taylor 6,400. Bijan down to 6,100. Arthur Smith has finally broken DraftKings, has gotten to move him all the way down. He had 11 touches last week. This is getting ridiculous. But what are you doing in the mid-range? I think we talked about a lot of people will have either Kamara or Barkley, and then probably one guy in this range. Who's your guy in this range? Who do you like this week in this mid-range?
Yeah, so, people like Jacobs, and we spoke about him already. It's not going to be Jacobs. Kenneth Walker, for one, it's just a tough matchup, but Charbonnet out-touched him last week, and that's out-snapped him as well.
I was surprised by that. I had to look that up, and Walker only had 9 touches last week.
Yeah, so that's very concerning, obviously, for 7K. Pollard,
let's talk about Tony Pollard. This is
let's talk about Tony Pollard.
It's been a weird year.
You wouldn't. I was one of the guys that thought, he had upside to be RB1 this season. I was drafting him in best ball. Yeah, high on Tony Pollard. Seen some underlying stats that show he might not be the same physically.
Yeah.
As far as expected rush yards, he's near the bottom. So yeah, that's concerning. The price tag though, this is the first time we've seen him under 7K.
Yep.
So that's intriguing. He's a guy that, you like him to be involved in the receiving game. You saw him with that big 60-yard catch against the Chargers. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of lukewarm on Pollard. What do you think?
I saw the price and I'm like, I'm going to be all in on Pollard. Then I got a little deeper. It's been the Philly run D is great. First of all, I don't think they're allowed a running back over 60 yards rushing, so you got to factor that in. You're right on Pollard. It's a good point. He has not hit explosive plays. I thought that. I didn't think a week now you're talking about the fact that Tony Pollard, is great when he gets volume, but not when he doesn't, which is very strange because he's an explosive guy. At least he was before. The blowouts have been tough. It seems like when they get way ahead, like they did last week, they limit his touches because they're just trying to save touches. There's no reason to use him when they're blowing guys out. You always think they're up 30, just run the ball. But if you're up 30, you run the ball with backups. You just don't. If you're up 10, you run the ball with Pollard. But you're up 30, you run the ball with backups. And they were up, was it 33-3 on New England last week or whatever? It was something crazy. You take those 3 blowout wins, you take the blowout loss against the Niners. That's 4 games out of his 7 where he's been limited because of points. The other 3 games, he has over 100 total yards and a lot of touches. So he has been good in those games, but the lack of explosive plays, it sucks when you need volume for a guy to work, but I'm tempted. It's 6,800. I like the price. I like the game. I just don't like the matchup at Philly on a run game. I think Dallas can try and throw the ball. And I also really like Jonathan Taylor this week. We talked about that Indy-Carolina game a bunch. He looked good last week. He only had 12 carries, but 95 yards. Zach Moss is still playing too much for my liking, although that's starting to shift. Taylor had 43 snaps last week. Moss had 28, but Moss looked good. Taylor only had a couple touches in the second half, so they kind of went away from him late. But you talk about great matchups. We talked about the Raiders earlier. Carolina is awful against the run. They're 31st in the NFL, allowing 5.0 yards per carry, a league high 23 points per game to running back. So the matchup, plus how Taylor's looked recently, kind of getting more and more touches each week, more and more snaps each week. I love Taylor at 6,400 this week.
Yeah, he's my favorite in this range too. I played him last week, and that's what I was going to bring up. Why he had 2 touches, 1 carry, or 2 carries in the second half? I don't understand that. He had 90 rushing yards at halftime or whatever. People were saying something about an injury, but yeah, I don't know. We didn't hear anything about that. It doesn't make sense why he would touch the ball twice.
He was on the field a bunch. He just didn't touch it. It seems weird. I read this somewhere, but the feeling you get is when Moss comes in, it's for a set running play and they touch the ball, and then Taylor's kind of in as part of the regular offense, and sometimes run, sometimes pass. It's weird they would use Moss that way, but I don't know. I think he's Jonathan Taylor. I think he's still down here at 6,400. Carolina sucks against the run. I don't know how many touches he'd need to be really, really good here. I like the spot. I think it's the last time we see him in this price range.
Yeah, I agree with all that. All that being said, he's still my favorite in this range. Bijan's interesting.
I was gonna say, what the heck do you do with Bijan? Because I need you to tell me because I don't have an answer.
I don't know that I have an answer either. He's going to be popular, so I would say that can be a reason to fade in tournaments. But if you like him, it's a good spot. Again, I like him a little bit more because Kirk Cousins is out. They're supposed to start another guy that at least I had never heard of.
So is
Jaron
it?
Hall.
That's right. Is it
Jaron?
the BYU guy?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. And they say they just traded for Dobbs, who might play, but won't start. I don't know, is what I've heard so far. Either way,
the guys we've never heard of is why it's impossible. Like it doesn't
Right.
happen. There's been weird guys this year. He was a fifth rounder in 2023. This draft too. Like we're talking about guys who were drafted deep this year. It's wild. And he's 25 too.
Oh wow, 20. Yeah, I guess some of those BYU guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's such a steep drop in price for Bijan. He had been 77, 78, 8K to start the season. Last week he went down to 6K, and he remained there. You figure with whoever Minnesota is going to start at quarterback, Atlanta should find themselves with some pretty good opportunities throughout the game. But I really worry about those touches. What do you think about Heineke starting? Is this better or worse for Bijan?
Man, I don't think Desmond Ritter's good at all, so I think it's better. I think they'll actually have to play the pass against Heineke, which is nice. Where at Ritter, you really don't. The weirdest thing with Bijan that if you had told me in week 9 we're talking about him down at 6,100, I'm like, oh, man, he must be just not looking great as a rookie, not having a lot of yards per carry. The dude looks really good. Like it just they don't use him. I mean, he had the game 2 weeks ago where he was apparently sick and he didn't play, but last week it was 11 touches, looked good, had a touchdown, had 62 yards. It's weird. I mean, I know that I like Tyler Algier. Tyler Algier's a really hard runner. Like I like Tyler Algier too, but why are you talking about a guy that you drafted super early in Bijan? Like it's a running back. Like you want to get your usage out of him while he's on your team. Like running backs don't last forever. It's just the whole thing is very. Minnesota's pretty good against the run, which I guess that's a problem too. I just don't know. I keep thinking like one of these weeks Bijan's going to have 24 carries and just kill everybody, but I don't know if it's coming. Arthur Smith. It almost seems like Arthur Smith is enjoys trolling the fantasy world so much. He's just doing it on purpose now. I realize he's not, but it almost feels like he is because it's that bad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because it might be on purpose, just a little bit. He goes out of his way to bring that stuff up now. And it's
to questions that aren't even about it. Like he just goes out of his way to bring it up. Yeah,
right. And you would think you're a head coach. Shouldn't you be above this type of stuff? It's really weird, but. Yeah, it's tough to trust Bijan, but I get it. He's cheap and it's a good matchup, so he might be the best back in this range. I like some guys cheaper than him, but yeah, I think Bijan's a fine option.
So cheaper than him. The names I have here, we got Gus Edwards off the 3 touchdown week last week. We mentioned Lamar didn't do much because Gus Edwards was scoring every 5 minutes. He's 5,900. Rashad White, 5,600 coming. They've been kind of blah against running the ball, but they're really involved in the passing game, which is obviously great. And, DraftKings, you get PPR. Jerome Ford's down here, 5,300, coming off an injury. And then Chuba Hubbard at 5,000 has clearly taken over the starting job from Miles Sanders. Outsnapped him at 45-12 last week. Didn't do a lot with it. But what do you do in the 5,000? Is there anybody really that really you want to play, or did I miss someone you really want to play?
Yeah, I think actually my favorite is Ramondre.
All right, I forgot about him.
54. So the concerning thing with Ramondre is that Ezekiel Elliott is still seeing work. Ramondre had 31 snaps last week. Elliott had 22, so that's pretty close.
What are we doing?
What are we doing here, right? I'm just gonna harp on the fact again that it's a great spot for the Patriots. And Stevenson has receiving upside, and he's cheap.
How many times Ramondre's top 60 yards rushing this year?
0. Okay.
Is that a ridiculous? That's a ridiculous stat. That's amazing.
Well, so he played the Eagles and the Dolphins. Dolphins twice. Dallas. They got blown out by New Orleans, 34-0. Blown out by Dallas. So he's had mostly tough matchups. I think all but one. He played the Raiders once.
And he had the Jets and the Saints in there too, who can both play defense too. You're right.
Definitely. So I looked into that, and he's been the victim of tough matchups and bad game scripts. So I think it's The potential's there. The potential's still there.
The 16 targets the last 2 weeks are what I really like. They've used him a lot more in the passing game than they did the weeks 2 through 5. Is he going to be popular? You're good with percentages. Like, are a lot of people going to play him at this price in the matchup?
I do think he'll be relatively popular.
I feel like people are kind of over him, but
I hope you're right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys in this range you can play. I don't. He's not going to be crazy popular, but like who else? People are going to play some Rachaad White in this range, like you mentioned, especially with what he's been doing in the receiving game. People are going to maybe play Chuba because he's 5K and got all the work last week. It's a good spot for these Cleveland guys. I don't think anyone's going to play either Cleveland guy. It's tough because which one do you pick?
Yeah. Kareem Hunt's been scoring touchdowns, but like Jerome Ford hasn't topped 40 snaps since week 4. Like they're mixing and matching a bunch. Who knows with that offense? But yeah, it is a good spot at home against Arizona for sure.
I don't think I can do it with Gus Edwards, but I guess I get it. He has 4 TDs in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah. And he's slowly taking over that job from Justice Hill too. He's outsnapped him 53-24 the last 2 weeks. So he's definitely the guy that's in that backfield at least.
Right. I think my favorite is Stevenson. I just wanted to mention Pierce hasn't practiced yet this week, so we might end up getting $4,300 Singletary. I don't know that that would be fine, I guess. I don't know. Does anyone stand out here for you?
Not particularly. Rachaad, I think you sold me on Stevenson. I've been he's been so frustrating in season long that I just kind of whatever. But I think you sold me with the fact that they've either been like blown out or faced really tough run defenses almost every single game, except for that Raiders game. He did score in that game. He didn't do much, but he did score. I think you sold me. I just hate the fact that Ezekiel Elliott gets like 40% of the snaps. I think it's just absurd. Yeah. But we've got a while here. Let's talk about receivers. Expensive guys. We've mentioned a few of them so far, but above. I'm just gonna go above 7,000, kind of in that range. You've got you have AJ Brown's 8,600, Cooper Kupp 8,500. Might have Brett Rippon at his quarterback. Mentioned CeeDee Lamb, big game last week. He's 8,200. Devontae Adams, we talked about him with the Jimmy Garoppolo misses. And they're the guys over 8,000. Are you pretty clearly AJ Brown and Lamb over the other two? I think it's hard to kind of, unless you really want to be a different at tournament. Cooper Kupp does have 17 targets last 2 weeks. They're throwing it to him. First time in his career under 30 total yards in back-to-back games. So if you want to talk about squeaky wheel kind of stuff, Cooper Kupp is probably that right now. Green Bay's had issues against slot receivers this year. It's really hard to get to Kupp or Adams over Lamb or Brown right now, though.
Yeah, I think you broke it down perfectly, and I'm just going to be on Brown and CeeDee in this spot. I mean, AJ Brown's look completely unstoppable. He's on, the record streak right now of 6 straight games with 125 plus receiving yards
and just dominating cornerbacks. Like he had a touchdown. He had a touchdown against Washington where it was like double covered and like, screw it, I'm just gonna throw it to him. And it wasn't even like close. It was just easy catch. It was
like
wild.
How do you stop AJ Brown? He's a guy, every time you watch him play, you sort of think, wow, he's unstoppable.
Yeah.
So, they don't have
good trade by Tennessee, by the way. That worked well.
Yeah. The Cowboys don't have Diggs, and the matchup doesn't worry me. Yeah, I think Brown's the number one option. CeeDee finally sorry.
No, I was going to say, tournament strategy-wise, can you in any way get to Kupp or Adams here? It's just like being completely different and trying to obviously 2 studs, but are you trying to are you playing that game at all?
I think you could get to Kupp only if Stafford plays, right?
Okay.
Only if Stafford plays. You mentioned that Packers have had some issue with slot guys, and they have Jair Alexander back now, and I don't know if he's gonna match up with Puka. Maybe it is a spot for Kupp to eat. I don't mind that from a leverage standpoint, but I like CeeDee Lamb too. People have just been begging the Cowboys to target Lamb more. He's one of those guys that's always open, sort of a la Jamar Chase, and he's proved it the last 2 weeks. It's looked great.
And the Eagles have quietly allowed a lot of big games to wide receiver ones. They have not stopped people, especially outside receivers, and they're playing Lamb a lot more on the outside the last couple of weeks. It's amazing how the Cowboys offense looks better the last couple of games when it's because they've used CeeDee Lamb a ton more the last 2 games. So it's
right. Who would have thought?
Yeah. Thanks, Mike McCarthy. Why don't we get let's get this rolling here. In the 7,000s, we've got kind of a bunch of names here that aren't super exciting but playable. Adam Thielen, if you're going to talk about that Carolina Indy game, like it's weird to play him at 700, but man, the guy just double-digit targets 4 of the last 5 games, just always involved. He has been better against man. We mentioned before, Colts play a ton of zone, so maybe that factors in, but 11 targets again last week. We've got Puka in here at 7,400. Mike Evans and Godwin, the Tampa Bay guys, are 73 and 7,000. Devontae Smith finally had a big game last week, 7 for 99, a touchdown against he's against Dallas at 7,100. His only 2 games were good against Washington, though, so maybe he beat Washington. At some point, defenses probably have to triple team A.J. Brown, and maybe Devontae gets loose. But anyone in the 7,000 range you like, it's a bit of a weird range this week with a lot of big names off the board, kind of pushing these guys up in price a little bit.
Yeah, I do have some interest in Thielen and Devonta Smith. Thielen 7,500. You remember people did not want to pay 3,900 for him in week 2, and he was 3,900 in week 3. And I mean, it was a very tough click. And now all of a sudden he looks like Cooper Kupp. I don't, his price keeps going up though. I think 7,500 is going to keep some people off of him. But yeah, that's a great game environment. We keep talking about it, so I do have some interest in Thielen.
And he's clearly Bryce's security blanket. Like you could tell whenever he needs like 3 yards, he throws to him. Even if he's covered, he throws to him. He's just clearly the guy that he drops back and looks for first.
Yep, and yeah, like Thielen has looked okay, right? He's a guy that it seemed like injuries and age were sort of catching up to him, but yeah, you got to say he's looked better this year. So yeah, I don't mind that. Devontae, I think, yeah, I have some interest there. I think he's just clearly good leverage if you're going to fade Brown. Like, if I don't play Brown, I might play Devonta.
And still expensive enough where it's not like an easy switch. Like if he was like 6,200, people are like, I'll just play him instead of AJ, save the money and hope he does well. But 7,100 is still pricey enough that I think it keeps people off him.
Yes, I think, and yes, I agree. I think there's going to be a big difference in the popularity of those two. Like Brown will be more than double. So, and it's not crazy to see Smith outscoring him. That's going to happen here and there. I don't know if it'll be this week, but yeah, so I have some interest in those guys. I guess going down, still kind of like Olave. You mentioned how it went for him last week. I mean, that was a really weird drop on that play that should have been a touchdown, and Carr missed him for another touchdown. And
right afterwards too. It was maddening.
It's just brutal. I rostered a bunch of Olave last week. I took a chance and it did not go my way. He is still cheap though, so yeah, I kind of like Olave. I don't know. What do you think about the 6K range?
Yeah, there's some names in here. I really like DK Metcalf this week. 6,900, I think, is expensive enough that people would jump. But 14 targets last week, like they are really trying to force the ball to him. 24 targets the last 2 weeks. When you have someone like DK that's that good, I think the production has to come when they're using him like that. The Ravens are good against wide receivers, but this is a game where Seattle's going to have to throw the ball. I think Baltimore's going to score. I think we're going to see some points here. He's only 5 for 67 last week. I love that. I love that he didn't do much with the targets. I love going back to him this week. 6,900 is expensive enough where I don't think a lot of people are going to click on him, but his talent plus the targets under 7,000 in a game that I have to throw. I really like how everything lines up for DK. I'm going to play him a bunch this week. I think we're looking at 100 yards and a touchdown for DK this week.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. That's a great call. I don't think anyone's going to be on DK. Yeah,
nice. I like to hear that.
Yeah, 24 targets over the past 2 weeks. He hasn't done anything with any of them. But yeah, people, he's banged up. He's questionable every week. People just aren't going to play him. But I think it's a good spot. It's a good spot for that passing game.
I think I like him. I like him even more. Even all the guys we talked about in the 7,000. I think I like DK a little bit more. I think that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to kind of just call him my mid-range guy.
I think that's pretty smart. You sold me. Yeah, that's That's great leverage. He's a guy that you can easily see being the top scorer at the position. He just hasn't had one of those games yet.
Yeah. And Baltimore's tough, but like I said, I think that they're going to have to throw, and give me a game where teams have to throw. Geno forced the ball in there a little bit. I think he's going to make sure he gets some targets. So I like that. I think Pittman works at 6,600. He was only 8 for 40 last week, but had 13 targets. Carolina's brutal, just all over. I mean, I know that they haven't had a lot of passing yards against them because nobody's passed, but they're allowing 8.8 yards a target to wide receivers. I think that Pittman will be very involved. Again, it all comes down if Carolina can do a little bit to make Indy keep dropping back and passing, but he works. You mentioned Olave. That's kind of a bounce back guy I like too. I mean, he's down to 6,300. I think that we never thought we'd see him this low as the season started. He was a second round pick in drafts, only over 60 yards once in the last 5 weeks. So I think that it works really well there too. And then the final at the bottom, I mean, Jordan Addison has been really good at 6,000, but we have no more Kirk Cousins. Like, does that take you fully off him? Because he was good again last week after the big game against the Niners. A lot of team targets with no Jefferson. Atlanta got smoked by DeAndre Hopkins last week, 3 touchdowns, and kind of made it look easy on those passes from Will Levis. Does no Cousins make you off Addison, or can you do it at 6,000?
I think it makes me off Addison.
That's good. That was the answer I was looking for. I think that's
yeah.
We just don't know what we're getting there, and it's so hard to play someone not knowing. But he's really involved and active and good. But without a quarterback, it's so hard to play someone we have no idea about the quarterback.
He's really involved and really good. But yeah, I like guys priced above and below him, and
yeah,
I'm just not like you mentioned Hopkins last week. He did that on 4 catches. And honestly, Will Levis looked great. I mean, he was making incredible throws. Yeah, I don't know if we're going to see that from who's ever quarterbacking for Minnesota.
I already forgot. Jaron Hall, is that his name?
Jaron Hall. Yeah, that's his name. I don't know if we're going to see that from him.
Couple quick questions in the chat. Someone said they're worried about the Dallas defense. I would definitely pick up the Saints defense over Dallas. I would not play Dallas against the Eagles. I would definitely, if you have the Saints are a really good option this week, I'd play that. Question for you, Ryan, because it just seemed too hard for me. Should you drop Tajay Spears for Madison Singletary, Rashee Rice, or Jerry Jeudy? I would take Rashee Rice. Love his second half with Mahomes. I think he's going to be the best receiver on that team in the second half.
Yeah, I agree. I would do it for Rashee Rice. I would do it for Jeudy if Rice wasn't there. I think
I would too. I just know Judy's on a bye this week, so if you needed somebody, at least you get Rice in that Sunday morning game. But yeah, I agree with you. I think I go Jeudy or Rice pretty easily. You can have Alexander Madison. I'm done with him.
Yeah, I'm done with him too. It was a big mistake on my part drafting him in best ball. Anyways, I think this guy's on it with Saints defense for sure. You want to stream Saints defense over Dallas, and I agree that I think I would play Downs over Addison too. Great game environment for Downs. He's been getting a ton of volume. Another talented rookie.
That's a good segue into the 5,000s. Then let's jump in there. Josh Downs is 5,200. He's one of the names I had highlighted down here. 6, 8, 6, and 9 targets the last 4 weeks. He has at least 5 catches in every Gardner Minshew start. Clearly, Minshew likes him. Clearly, his offense is much different. I'm not sure better or worse, but different with Minshew. We got Zay Flowers at 5,700. Terry McLaurin's down here at 5,600. Kind of an interesting name. What do you like in the 5,000s?
McLaurin really stands out for me. Another one of those sort of, he just hasn't exploded yet, but the targets are there. 12, 11, 9. We know how good he is. We know he makes big plays. It's a good spot for Washington too, against a Patriots team that's not very good. I like McLaurin. Again, I'm being pushed there a little because I like some Patriot players too, so it just makes sense. Zay Flowers projects well in that range. I get it. I prefer McLaurin. I like Downs too.
I feel like we're just waiting on the big Zay Flowers game. Like he's getting a lot of targets. He's 11, 8, 6, and 7 last week. He only had 19 yards last week on 5 catches. They're running like weirdly short, kind of quick stuff to him. I feel like we're going to get a big Zay Flowers blow-up game, but I also feel like it's one of those guys I'm keep playing, hoping for it, and that never works when you do that. Like by week 12, you're out of money and it doesn't work. But
I think so too.
Yeah, I prefer McLaurin. I prefer McLaurin too, and I just 9+ targets last 5 weeks. Howell looked really good last week. The offense looked good. They looked like they kind of figured out how to deal with the lack of offensive line a little bit. I mean, it's always going to hurt you, but New England had been good against the pass. Tyreek and Waddle both had 100 last week. Granted, that's Tyreek and Waddle. Like that's we can't compare those to most guys, but I like McLaurin. I like Downs. I think Downs just like in a PPR situation at 5,200, he gets catches every week with Minshew, and I think it's easy to go back to that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, those are the guys I prefer. The thing about Flowers, he hasn't topped 78 receiving yards yet and only has 1 touchdown. And you're right, like it's going to happen, but clearly, there's something to that in that he's a smaller guy, getting shorter passes. And the Seattle matchup, they actually have 2 pretty good corners.
Yeah, they do.
So, yeah.
It feels like we always have that one guy every year. Like, we like him in preseason. He's a big name. He was fun. He's a rookie. It's going to come. It's going to come. It's going to come. And maybe it does, but it's been 8 weeks and hasn't yet. Like I think you make more money getting off those guys too early than you do kind of waiting for that one big blow up week and hoping for it. But receivers that are cheap, there are a lot of names down here, and there's one I want to ask you in particular about. But you mentioned Demario Douglas going to be popular at 4,000. No Devontae Parker. No Kendrick Bourne. It sucked. Bourne had been actually playing well before tearing his ACL. I think a lot of people are going to have Douglas at 4,000. But I want to talk to you about a receiver that's under 5,000 that there is no way in the world we thought he would get down here at any point this year. He was a 3rd-round draft pick in season-long leagues. Had 8 targets last week, probably the best talent upside guy in this range. But Christian Watson is 4,900. Your Packers against the Rams. He's had a lot of inaccurate targets. You look at numbers like, targets to him, but that can't be caught. That number's high. But man, Christian Watson's 4,900. You talk about a guy who can blow up. You don't get many like this under 5,000.
No, and I think just based on talent alone, it's fine if you want to take a shot on him. It's very concerning that he doesn't have more than 3 catches in a game this year.
Yeah.
But you're right, a guy that his talent jumps off the page. So I get it based on that perspective. Again,
I'm playing him this week.
Okay, that's fine. We spoke about Love at the start, and maybe it's my Packers bias. I'm not sure I'll get there, but I get it. I don't know. I kind of like some other guys more, I guess. Just going down.
So not quite as draft hypey, but pretty draft hypey. Jahan Dotson is hit 5,000 down here. We talked about this Washington New England game a little bit. Finally broke out last week, and as they changed their offense a little bit, like quick targets, getting to the ball quick is a good thing. 8 for 108 on 10 targets. First game over 45 yards. They're clearly trying to get involved. 18 targets last 2 weeks. No Curtis Samuel. Do you like Dotson again this week?
Yeah, I do like Dotson. Yeah, if I don't have McLaurin, there's a really good chance I'll have Dotson. Curtis Samuel still hasn't practiced this week, so that's at least something. Pay attention to that. It would make me like McLaurin and Dotson even more. So yeah, I do have some interest there. I have a little bit of interest in Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Do you need like Tyler Lockett not to play for that to happen, or you do it anyway?
I don't know. Both Metcalf and Lockett are just perpetually questionable. So it's
every week. I even ignore it now because it's just they're questionable every week. I don't even look at it.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But sometimes you get where, one of them sits out the whole second half. We see it just about every year. And JSN doesn't even need that. He's a guy that's been involved in the offense now, touchdowns in back-to-back games, just a talented guy. So, I don't mind going there. I think Douglas is
that block that DK had on the Smith and Jigga touchdown was awesome. DK's just
awesome. Yeah. So I have some interest there. I have some interest in Shaheed. I know he only had 3 targets last week, but he caught them all for 153 yards.
They were all pretty darn good targets.
Yeah, and we've seen him catch these deep balls all season. So I don't mind that. I think Douglas is going to be really popular. So
yeah,
he's a great cash game play. I'll definitely be playing him in cash games. Tournaments, when a guy's going to be the most popular in his range, he's a good fade too, if you want to fade him. There are a ton of guys in the 3K range you can play. I don't know.
There's one I particularly like in this range. Is there anybody in the 3K range you particularly like?
One that stands out. No, you go for it. I was going to name a bunch of guys.
There's one that anybody in the 3K range, like, is coming with a lot of risk. You don't even need to say that. But my guy ran a route on 97.5% of the dropbacks last week. Is in a game that we've talked about liking a bunch already today. Last 3 weeks, over 60 snaps in each of those weeks. Talented rookie. I'm going Jonathan Mingo in Carolina, 3,400. I think he's just a really interesting, super cheap part of this game. Or if you want to go like kind of a run back, you want to play Minshew and Pittman or whatever it may be, and you don't quite have the money to get somebody else. Or I think Mingo at 3,400, he's on the field a ton. Give me someone talented on the field a lot, getting some action at this price. And I think in a game I kind of always just play someone like that. I think you just fall into production 61, 64, and 66 snaps the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. I don't think I have anyone better than that.
Who is there anybody else down here you do like?
Like is a strong word, but I can.
Yeah,
I'll mention some guys. Kendrick Bourne is out. I think Devontae Parker is also going to be out. So there's where the love for Douglas comes from. But they also, it's going to be 3K Jalen Reagor starting, and I don't know.
I didn't think we had Jalen Reagor on the podcast in 2023. That's pretty good.
I was like, do I even mention $3,100 Smith Schuster? I don't know, but he's a guy that looks so limited physically after some of the injuries he's had. But like, would it shock anyone?
Someone's going to have to play, right? Besides Douglas in the slot, but the other guys are going to have to play guys. And Bourne was really good and getting a lot of action. I mean, Washington can't stop anybody in the past. Like, somebody's got to be there.
These guys are 3K, so like, could they catch 6 balls for 50 yards and a touchdown? I mean, that's 17 points. Kind of anybody could do that. There's other guys here too. The Giants guys are interesting. It's a good matchup, and you have Waller out. Yeah. So like, they kind of Wandale. He's questionable. Maybe doesn't have the upside. Slayton. I don't know. Like, you could take a chance on some of these Giants guys. It's a spot where one of them has to succeed almost. Yeah, one of them has to succeed.
It's the Raiders. Someone's going to have to do something at some point.
Right. So, and they don't have Waller. They can't just give it to Saquon every time.
Right.
So, I think Giants guys are interesting. I think people have been mentioning Michael Gallup just because he's in that game environment. We saw him get 10 targets 2 weeks ago. We know he has big play upside. We've seen it before. So I think
how much is Gallup? He's in the threes.
36.
Yeah. Okay. So
I get it. Probably won't go there. I definitely prefer your Mingo call. I think.
Speaking of the Giants guys, real quick, Wandale played 60 snaps last week and had 1 target, no catches. But I think you throw all that out. That game was dumb. Once Tyrod got hurt, they just weren't even throwing the ball. You give me 60 snaps of Wandale with Daniel Jones at 3,500. It's hard to not think that he does at least something with that.
Man, that's a great point. Because it was just 2 weeks ago when Wandale was 3 weeks ago, he was massive chalk at 3,800. People see 8 catches on 8 targets, and he's their slot guy. It should be even a better spot now with Jones back and without Waller. So yeah, I can definitely get behind Wandale.
That's probably if I were to go second to Mingo, it'd probably be Wandale with the thought that give me the 60 snap number and just throw out everything else from last week because that game was just ridiculous.
Yeah, I think
one of the worst football games ever played. By the way, the game was horrible.
Yeah, no, I agree. You just throw it out. I think that's a great point. There's one guy I want to mention because I just don't think anyone's going to click him, and I think there's a little bit of upside, and it's Elijah Moore. Look, I don't know what to think. We think Watson's going to play. I don't know. When Watson was playing, he was getting 9 targets, 7 targets. I know he hasn't done anything with them, and most of them have been very short. But they don't have Peoples-Jones anymore. They don't have Chubb. It's a great spot if they're going up against Clayton Tune. It's just, I know it's gross, but I'm considering it.
I don't hate that. How much is more?
He's 39. I mean, it's cheap.
over 59 snaps last 3 weeks and over 50 snaps every week. So he's on the field almost every play for them every single game. Like that's a huge sign right there. And your point about targets with Deshaun is really interesting. It's 7, 9, and 9 the first 3 games of the year. I think that's.
I thought things were looking up for him. I
Yeah.
saw those targets, and you saw some of those games, and I was like, this is a guy who might do something. And I don't know. He's really cheap.
Yeah. I like that. It's a fun week. There are a lot. The thing that stuck out to me was how gross the games are, but then how many cheap receivers I think are really fun and playable. And like a normal week, I'd be like Christian Watson 4900 is the easiest thing for me ever. And then you get to some of these names, you're like, there's a lot of guys down here you can play. So I think that I think the percentage will be mixed around a little bit with DeMario being the highest, but I think that there's enough options out here. You don't necessarily have to play him this week.
Right.
Real quick, we've gone a little bit long. There's a lot to talk about. We haven't talked in a while, so I think we're enjoying that. But tight end, we got Mark Andrews at the top at 6,800, then a bunch of names kind of in the middle. T.J. Hawkinson's 5,200, Dallas Goedert 48, Taysom Hill with his crazy rush stats is 4,700. Then you got some cheap guys. You got Kyle Pitts. You mentioned Njoku and Trey McBride earlier. What's your thought on tight end? You have any thought of paying up, or we're kind of down in the low 4,000s, high 3 range this week?
Well, I think paying up makes sense. I don't think I'm going to do it, but I think it makes sense on a slate where you don't have Travis Kelce. What if you get the 25 plus from Andrews or whatever? I get that he's more expensive now. It's just a risk that could pay off. I don't think I'm going to do it. I like Njoku and McBride at 38 and 3,700. I kind of like Njoku for similar reasons that I mentioned about Moore. It's a great matchup. And
he's weirdly backward. The only thing I have a problem with is he's weirdly backwards. He was much better with PJ Walker than he was with Watson.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
But I think that I think the talent at 3,800 at tight end, like I think Njoku is obviously we've waited for the breakout for years, but I think last week was 77 yards and a touchdown, 8 targets. I think the talent 3,800 it's a nice pivot off McBride, who I think will be significantly more popular.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like McBride too. Talented. I've always liked McBride. Talented guy. I don't.
And Ertz is obviously done. We just don't have a quarterback.
Yeah. I don't think I would play McBride if Clayton Tune's going to start.
I think it's going to be. I think the stuff I read, I think it's going to. Yesterday seems like that's pretty much the indication it's going to be Tune. I don't know what they're doing with Kyler. I don't know if he's actually ready or healthy or what they're doing there, but I think it's going to be Clayton Tune this week.
I still think he's a fine play. We see rookie QBs lean on tight ends sometimes with short targets. I mean, just the same way Dobbs leaned on him. I mean, so yeah, I still kind of like Trey McBride.
You mentioned someone that was uber cheap. I think it was Daniel Bellinger. Was that your uber cheap guy?
Yeah, I don't necessarily like Daniel Bellinger, but he's 2,500.
And obviously Waller's not going to play, so that's you're just looking at on the field volume, and you hope 4 catches and a touchdown would be great. But
right, and I think
he has 4 catches all year, so maybe not 4 in a game.
Right, maybe a guy like Mike Gesicki is a better option. He's 2,600, and we just mentioned that the Patriots have like all their receivers out. Who's going to do it for him? Maybe it's Hunter Henry and Gesicki. I don't know. Like, I think for 2,600, you could take a chance in tournaments. It's just the tight end position is especially weak. Like Logan Thomas looks okay for 35 as far as like a safer option based on what his usage has been in the past 4 weeks. I don't know. Does anyone stand? Cade Otton was the other guy I was going to mention. Does anyone stand out for you?
No, I think that I think I'm either going to go Njoku or McBride, or if I pay up a little bit, I'm going to get to 4,900 and go Dallas Goedert. Just a cheaper piece of the biggest game of the week. He has 29 targets last 4 weeks, and I think we see games where Goddard was really involved. He had 7 targets last week. I think 4,800 is actually a pretty good price for Goddard. I thought he would be a little bit higher than that. Like I would take him. I take him over Hawkinson without Cousins this week. I would take him over Andrews for 2,000 less. Like I think Andrews, Andrews can always obviously blow up, but he hasn't had top 4 catches since week 5. He hasn't seen more than 6 targets in the last 5 weeks. Like they're spreading it around a little bit. He has the touchdown upside, which is big with Andrews. But I think I would, in terms of just like talent, who I like most of the week, I think I go Goddard at 4,800. And I may try and get there over the McBride and Njoku guys. If I can't afford it on a team, I'll go those 2 guys. But I think I'm going to try and get to Goddard at 4,800, which I think is a good price in this game. That's the highest total on the slate. I don't think he's going to be uber popular at the tight end spot.
Yeah, Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, no, I'm with you. That was a great sell. I agree with everything you said about Goddard.
Any Taysom Hill in your life?
No, but I get it. But no, I don't know.
Nine for 63 and 2 touchdowns rushing last week. It's absurd. And it threw a 44-yard pass to Shaheed.
Yeah. I was hesitant, but I brought him up to you, I think, on the last pod we did. Yeah. Just, is Taysom ever going to do it? And then, he also had that game with 7 catches against Houston. So, I mean, he's involved. I get it. But, yeah, no, I'm with you. I prefer Goddard.
Yeah, I do too. I just think he only ran 12 pass routes last week with Juwan Johnson back. Like, he clearly was just the kind of gadget guy, but it really worked. I mean, if you get 9 carries and all the red zone or all the inside the 5 touches, like that's huge for a tight end. But at 4,700, I would just go Goddard instead. Last thing before we jump out of here, defense this week. I think there's a defense everybody's going to play, but what are you doing at defense this week?
Yeah, I think. I mean, the cheapest defense on the board is going up against Aiden O'Connell. So
that was the one I thought everybody was going to play.
I think they're going to be very popular. So yeah, they're a good option. But it looks like the most popular, at least as of now, might be the Patriots.
Yeah, they're 2,900. I thought those are the 2 I had under 3,000 listed. I have one that I really, really, really like in the low 3s that I don't think anyone's going to play. But I think everybody's going to play Giants and Patriots.
Yeah, so I'll save that one for you. Everybody's going to play Giants and Patriots. They're solid options. The one other team I'll mention is if we get Rippon starting, give me the Packers for 2,800.
Some pro Packer for you. I like it. Finally.
Yeah, for sure. Now, above 3K, I don't know. I'll let you take it from there.
I mean, the Giants, I just think 2,300 make a lot. They had 10 sacks the last 2 weeks. Like, they're really getting after the quarterback. The Raiders gave up 6 sacks last week. Rookie quarterback. I think everybody's going to go there. You mentioned Patriots. I think that, they have Howell's been sacked at historical rates. I know we talked a lot about how they changed the offense, but still, that's one game. Like, it was insane amount of sacks. So the defense, and I think that if you want to go expensive, like both the Browns and the Saints over 4,000, they're expensive, but like they make a lot of sense. Like they're home favorites. They're against bad quarterbacks. Who knows anything about Clayton Tune? We know that Badgett is who he is. The team I really like will surprise you because it's actually in the highest total game on the slate. I really like the Eagles defense this week at 3,400. They only owned 1 sack last week. Before that, they had 4, 5, 4, and 5 sacks. So like averaging 4.5 sacks a game. The Dallas allowed sacks the last 4 weeks are 3, 5, 4, and 3. Like their offense has been better, but they're still allowing sacks. They've allowed 8 sacks the last 2 weeks. I think Philly's going to get after Dak. I think they're going to sack him. I think they force Dak into a couple bad mistakes. No matter if they can, they convert on them for a pick 6 or a fumble 6 or something like that. I think the Eagles defense can make a big play in this game, and I don't think anyone's going to play them in this game because it's the highest total. Everybody's talking about the offense this game. I really like Philly defense at 3,400 to make a big play and be one of the better defenses on the slate, even in a game that's going to have a lot of points.
Yeah, that's a good call. And I don't think anybody is going to play. Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to play Philly in the highest total game. That's a really good call.
I would think not, and I really think if nothing else, they get 3 or 4 sacks and then give me a couple turnovers, big play. Dak will give it up to you a little bit. I think that there's a couple big play options in this game. I think that Philly D is where I'm going to go at 3,400. I'm going to save try and find the $500 from New England and play a little bit different, be a low percentage defense that I think can make a big score.
Yeah, I like that. I was going to mention maybe paying all the way up for 4,200 to get Myles Garrett against Clayton Tune.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah, so I don't think anyone is going to do it, and I think the Browns would have a ceiling. So I that's okay. And I'll just close it off.
I hope Clayton Tune's family is not listening because there's been a lot of strays this way this podcast.
Yeah, okay. And I was gonna. That's a good point to bring up because last week on here, I was saying. What a spot for the Falcons at home against Will Levis. And
yeah, I was too.
Seriously, and it was completely the opposite. So yeah, my apologies to Will Levis. Yeah, just close it out with the Giants are the cheapest defense on the slate, and Pro Football Focus ranks that matchup as the biggest mismatch between defensive line and offensive line. In that, yeah, you mentioned those sack numbers for the Giants. They have a pretty good defensive line. And the offensive line for Vegas has been terrible. So that's your cash game play. But yeah, for tournaments, somewhere else, like we said.
Yeah, I think the Giants in the cash game just makes too much sense. Like it's just with that stat behind it at 2,300, like it works too easily. I think a lot of people will just click that and kind of move on.
Yeah, makes sense. You're going up against Aiden O'Connell.
Anything else on your mind? We've got a little bit long here, but we had a lot to talk about. Anything else on your mind before we jump out of here?
Yeah, no, I think we broke everything down.
Beautiful. Well, it was good. Good to be back talking football with you. My apologies for missing the last few weeks. Just stuff comes up and happens, but it was really good. Really good to chat with you. It was always fun. I think we hit a lot of stuff in a kind of a smaller slate. It's a more for a slate that you look at, you're like, oh my gosh, games are horrible. Like there's a lot to get into in here. So I think we hit it up well. But hope everybody has a really good week. We thank everybody for listening. If you could rate or review the podcast, that would help us also. Hopefully everybody has a really good week 9 of the NFL season. We're like halfway through the season. It's flying by. We'll be back at you next week, week 10, talking more DFS. Good luck this week, everybody.
Thanks, Scott. Good luck, everybody.